So, it's great to see you all here supporting the community. It's another RISC OS show for RISC OS Open, and we're pleased to be here. Hope if you've not visited us at our stand, come and have a look later. We've got various things there. I'll talk through what we've got in a minute. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the news of what's happened in the last year, well, since we were last here at the London Show. I'm going to talk you through the updates we've done to the NutPi, which is our SD card for RISC OS Pi with third-party software. I'm going to talk to you about the bounty scheme that we run and give you a bit of a preview of some of the stuff that's been going on behind the scenes and some of the things that are in the near future for RISC OS. Finally, I'll just point out that we've got a robot arm on our stand as a novelty. So first of all, happy birthday RISC OS Open. We're 10 years old this year. So in the 20th of June, in the 20th of June 2006, we incorporated RISC OS Open to be a focal point, the hub of the RISC OS community, and to try and preserve what we thought at the time was an operating system that was destined to disappear, and we didn't want it to disappear. So we've been trying to build it and build a community around it, support all of the existing community as best we can for the last 10 years, and here's to the next 10. So it's been a pleasure. So on the NutPi, this is our joint venture with all sorts of people from the RISC OS community that write commercial software. And one of the things that the Raspberry Pi made obvious to us was, if you can buy a computer for £30, you can't spend £600 buying some software for it. So we negotiated a deal with all of the authors to sell a severely cut down price-wise version of their software that's locked down on the Raspberry Pi. And I think on the leap day of this year, Raspberry Pi released the Raspberry Pi 3, which unfortunately meant that we had to then contact all of the authors and say, please send us versions of your software that works on the Raspberry Pi 3, because many of them didn't. Partly because the software is locked down to only run on Raspberry Pi hardware, and that's part of the deal for selling it so cheap. The locking down was unable to recognise Raspberry Pi 3s as being Raspberry Pis, so that was one thing we had to change. But one of the benefits of us updating the Raspberry Pi software is that we've got the latest versions of various pieces of third-party software on there. So support for Raspberry Pi 3 and new versions of applications. Some of the applications that have updated are MoreDesk, which is my program, if anyone knows. SparkFS, which is a filing system for compressed images like zip files. We've also got WimpWorks, which is a development tool for when you want to build desktop applications, normally in BASIC. We've also got Guttenprint. Is that Martin Werner? So his very useful printing tool has been updated. And we've got a whole pile of updates from RComp. I'm not even going to list them, but including Messenger and DataPower, which are well-known packages in the RISC OS community. And the desktop development tools from RISC OS Open, we've put the latest version of those on there. But they will only run on the Raspberry Pi, so don't buy that if you want a cheap version of the development tools. It's not going to work. So other things, Impact is, I could go on, there's more, but Impact is a database program, that's good as well, that's been updated. So our bounty scheme is basically our way of saying to the community, put your money where your mouth is. If you want new features in RISC OS, then put money into these pots, donation pots, bounty pots, and developers in the community, when they see the pot reaching a certain level that they feel is the right level for them, then hopefully they'll be motivated to do the work that we all want to see happen. Some of it is fundamental below the hood kind of work, and some of it is nice user-facing work. And I'll talk to you about some of the improvements that are coming out of that now. So we have had a whole load of updates from the JPEG bounty, and what that means is all of the modern formats of JPEG are now supported in the OS, and that's the sort of images you get out of your digital camera or out of a phone or something like that. And there's been a whole pile of updates there. So it was last updated in 1994. That's how out of date our JPEG library was. And it now supports progressive scan, which is where it builds a JPEG down the screen instead of in alternating lines. It also supports arithmetic encoding, which is just an encoding scheme that JPEGs have been using for a long time now, and the OS couldn't decode those before. So this affects paint and draw and change of facade, the pin board. All of the things that are built into the operating system now support all of these new JPEG formats. So you can finally put a new format JPEG onto your pin board, onto your backdrop image if you want. Other bounty work that's been happening, EDID work. I'm sure I've talked about this in the past, but EDID is about automatically detecting what monitors are connected to your machine and what resolution those monitors are, so it can set up the desktop to the right resolution. That work is being tested right now. If we're happy with the test results, then that will be published in RISC OS. It will be just part of the downloads from our website, and that bounty will be marked as completed. So that's imminent. Paint and USB improvements. So there are two separate bounties. One is to do with improving Paint in many ways. So there's loads of things we'd like to see Paint do. There's even a long-standing bug where it would crash quite often when you selected a brush tool. So there's a list of things that we want to see happen in Paint, like dragging and dropping sprites and things like that. That has been claimed as a bounty, and there is a developer actively beavering away on that one. The USB improvements, this is about making RISC OS support a more up-to-date port of the USB software stack, which originally came from BSD, a different operating system. And it's addressing some known issues with USB, and it's broadening the range of devices that we can support. All of the fundamental work in USB has started now, so that bounty was claimed yesterday, I think. So that's bang up to date now. We actually realised when discussing with the person claiming that bounty that the piece of work that we had originally identified was too big. It simply wasn't gaining enough money in the pot to justify the amount of effort that was going to be spent on doing the bounty. So what we've agreed to do is split it into a couple of bounties. So there'll be the step one, do all of this major chunk of work, and then step two will be a new bounty that will open to do the extra bits at the end. So hopefully that makes it a palatable and achievable thing, and it actually makes some progress, instead of us waiting indefinitely for the pot to creep up to a level that the developer thinks is the right level. And they're not charging a lot of money, they're basically working on, if I was working at Tesco, how much would I be earning per hour? Therefore that's about the right number. So that's that bounty. Finally, we've been looking into a roadmap for bounties. So we've been looking at what are the new bounties that we need to open. I think we've only got 3 now that are open. So we had a quick review of what the most important stuff to come next should be, and one of the highlights was the network stack. So RISC OS's network stack hasn't received a lot of attention in recent years, well, in a long time. And there are modern standards like IPv6, which is the way the whole internet is being rewired at the moment. And there's Wi-Fi support, so support for Wi-Fi access points, so you don't have to have wired Ethernet. All of those things, that would be nice to have that natively in the operating system. There's related things like firewalls and things like that. So we're considering opening at least one bounty, or possibly a roadmap bounty that has, it's like our file system one, which was so big that we had to chunk it up, similar to USB. So you do the first bounty first for the most important fundamental foundational work, and then you do new bounties. Once you've got past that point, you open the next one and say, right, now we've done that, let's do this. But I think the networking stack is a particularly big and hard thing, but we feel that we need to start work on that soon, so we'll probably open a bounty there. So coming soon, RISC OS Pico. So imminently there are updates for RISC OS Pico about to be released, which finally mean it should work on Raspberry Pi. So for those of you who don't know, RISC OS Pico is our tiny little SD card, micro SD card, that boots straight into BBC Basic, just like an old BBC Micro. In fact, it boots into Mode 7, so it looks exactly like a BBC Micro. And it comes with a range of demonstration programs, including the one that controls the USB robot arm on our stand. And it's tiny as well. It's only a few megabytes of stuff. In fact, I think the biggest thing on there is a book, a basic programming guide. That is probably the biggest thing included on that. So what else have we got? We've got the new RISC OS Pi release candidate. So this is going to come in the next few weeks, I think. And the main thing is there's a lot of issues around the GPIO lines on Raspberry Pis, which we're trying to clobber. So those issues will shortly be fixed, and we'll release a new candidate of that for the community to test. Once that's done, there are, oh no, I'm skipping ahead of myself. The next thing is DDE update. So our own toolchain, unfortunately, does have some bugs in it, and I admit this because I didn't write it. It came from Acorn. So our toolchain does have some issues where it was accessing bits of memory that it's not supposed to, and we've recently been tightening up the way RISC OS protects its memory to try and make RISC OS more stable, and that did cause our toolchain to have some issues. There's only one thing left that we need to fix on the toolchain before we can release a new version of DDE, which will work on modern versions of RISC OS, and that is the ABC application. And we know where it is, we know who's got the source code to it, we've asked them to give us a copy, and hopefully imminently we'll be able to sort that out. And once that's done, we can release an update. It will probably be a free update to people who've got the DDE in the recent past, maybe in the last 6 months, and it will address any issues that they'll see on modern versions of RISC OS. The next thing on the list that I was almost jumping ahead to was the RISC OS Pi stable release, and this is something that we've been working towards since the Raspberry Pi first emerged. And there are two things that are currently stopping us from saying we believe that our RISC OS on Raspberry Pi is stable. And when I say stable, I don't mean it falls over all the time. I mean it's just of the right standard. We think it's good enough to get that name. And the video driver is one thing which has some issues still, and that's something Jeffrey Lee, I know, has been beavering away on. And there's another thing which is to do with being able to press keys down when you reboot the machine to make it do certain things. So this is a traditional Acorn thing from the past where you hold delete down when you're powering on and it resets all of the non-volatile configuration. At the moment, that is the way it's done since we introduced hardware abstraction layers into RISC OS in the late 90s. It's quite convoluted, and we're going to address that and improve the way that all works, which incidentally will help move us towards this stable release of RISC OS on the Raspberry Pi. So there's some related work, and it has a number of benefits, not least of which it will massively simplify some areas of all of the HALs, the hardware abstraction layers on all of the platforms that have USB. And the next thing is the user guide. So this is one of those perfect examples of a project that non-programmers can contribute to, and it's been involving the community so far. There's been quite a few people who volunteered to help, And we've taken the original Acorn user guide for RISC OS and we're bringing it kicking and screaming into the current state of the nation, basically. We've done about half of the user guide so far. We've basically rewritten large chunks of it, we've improved various bits of text, and we've had a load of people helping to proofread it. However, one thing I would say is 60% of the stuff that has been rewritten was rewritten by RISC OS Open rather than the volunteers. So we're still looking for more people to help with that. And basically, if you can read English and you are semi-literate, you can probably help with this project. So definitely volunteers needed. And it's one of those, I quite like this because it's one of those things that we can point to and say, you guys can directly help this, and you don't have to know the inner workings of the hardware abstraction layer or anything like that. So it's quite useful. And once we've got that done, we will do a print run and start selling it as a printed copy. And we'll probably have a free copy of it as a PDF file on every copy of RISC OS that we ship. So finally, this picture took me literally 30 seconds to knock together. It's a Raspberry Pi running our RISC OS Pico release and driving this USB robot arm that you can buy in kit form from Maplin. And we have one of these on our stand. We have a much better stand next to us with far better robot arms on it. But you can have a play with that on our stand if you'd like. And it is quite useful. It helps you understand, because it's written in BASIC, the driver for it helps you understand quite straightforwardly how to control a device like this through a Raspberry Pi, just with a bit of BASIC. So it's quite fun. So we also have copies of our books and all of the stuff that you can download for free from our website. We do have it pre-packaged on SD cards and things on our stand if you want to buy anything. So thank you. I'll just open the floor for questions now. Hello.
When you do the next release kit,
yes.
If you think of people now who've had RC14 for a year and a half or two,
Mm-hmm.
there's already need a way of updating that rather than replacing it with something fresh. So rather than an SD card image file,
yeah.
Are you thinking of providing a sort of copy this over and it'll update your machine type approach?
We're not thinking of doing that directly, but if someone would like to help us do that, that would be great. I would have no objection to doing it, because it is a bit tedious having to rebuild your boot sequence and all of your configuration changes. So having some sort of migration script would be good.
I don't mind volunteering to do that.
Yeah? Okay, cool. Yeah, everyone saw that. We have witnesses. Thanks, Chris. Okay, next.
On the USB side,
Mm-hmm.
is there any talk of USB 3?
There has been talk of USB 3, yes. Yeah, I don't think that will be the first step. It might come when we, in the second step, when we upgrade to a newer set of the source code from FreeBSD. But at the moment, that's not on the initial plan for the first lot of changes.
I heard something on the grapevine that there was a programmer who was interested in doing a bouncer, but the money wasn't quite enough for him.
Yeah.
And the problem here is that the people who look at the bouncers and are thinking of contributing wouldn't know how much more needed to be contributed to that bouncer to attract a programmer to that programmer to do it. So there's a bit of a problem there. Is there some solution to that? Should we add something to the bounty system that says, how much more is needed?
It's very difficult. It's difficult. Different people have different ideas of what's the right amount.
What's the solution? I mean, what have you thought of this, and have you? Because it is a problem if people who are prepared to give don't know how much more is needed to attract a programmer. There's no reason why they should know.
You need two approaching figures so that if the developers are doing cheaper than that, one figure revolves.
An auction.
And the other, you don't have to say who the developer is.
Yeah.
But you can just say the minimum bid we've got for this at the moment is that, and the bounty stood here, so it's that far apart.
Yeah.
That might be helpful, because you can say, if anyone's interested in doing any of the bounties, and what the sums are, because I was Richard Keefer said earlier today, that if he was doing impression commercially, it'd be £200,000 to actually, the volume of work needed to actually do it.
Yeah, yeah. We're a couple of orders of magnitude away from the amounts that most developers are looking for. Yeah. So I think different people have a different idea of what the right figure is. But if we know of a ballpark figure, we could probably just say this feels like the amount that we need to reach for this bounty, and just make that known to the community as a bit of a motivator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was suggesting an adaptation that you've got people adding at the bottom and the bars going up.
Yeah.
You can have a figure at the top where developers would effectively bid a price. I mean, it doesn't have to be published to anybody except you. So in effect, say, well, I do it for this, and then somebody else will say, okay, by all means, or no, I can do it for less. So
Yeah.
even if there's only one person, you have some sort of idea of a target, but if you've got the option, maybe somebody else thinking, I can do it for less than that.
Yeah.
The thing of closing gap, and you might then think, oh, well, I'll give them the last little thing.
I wish we were in a position where we had competing developers.
But you've only got one. Again, it helps to have an idea.
I think you're right.
Say, well, put another 200 on there and I'll do it.
Yes.
Then we all know
Yeah, I think we'll-
200 about.
It might encourage
Even if a
people to
developer
give.
puts in a high figure to start with, and then maybe the option later bring it
It's
down.
not unreasonable. If people have given us an indication of what the number is that's the right number, we can make that known.
Yeah.
If we're a long way short, we can make it known and just say, look guys, it needs a bit more. Yeah. Yeah. That's fine. Yeah. Good idea. Any other questions? Hi.
So regarding the insinuated network bounty, how do you have an idea for how many parts it might be divided into, and how interdependent they are? Like, for example, how do you need to do IPv6 before you get Wi-Fi, or vice versa, for example?
Yes. So no, we haven't broken it down yet into the work. That's what we normally like to do. We normally like to ourselves try and imagine what the project plan looks like and get an idea for how big we think the work is, and then we say, right, what are the logical ways to chunk this up? So we did that with the file systems. We actually did it with something that isn't a bounty, but we did it with the programmer's reference manuals about how we would go about updating those. Just to give us an idea of how much effort it would be if we wanted to go and do it ourselves. Now we're updating all the manuals, and we realised it was about 2 man-years of work. So we thought, that might not happen in the near future. But yes, we'll do a project plan for it, a very brief project plan, and that will give us an idea of how to chunk up the bounty itself. But what we normally asked the developers to do is to supply us with what they think their plan is. Once they've said that they would like to claim it, we say, well, give us what you think is involved and how hard you think each bit is, how much work it is. And that gives us an indication of whether, well, one, that they're sane, and two, that they've appreciated the magnitude. Because these things aren't bounties for nothing. They're bounties because they're hard. And if someone thinks, right, I'll just do it in a weekend, then they've probably misunderstood what the bounty is asking them to do. So we always ask them to give us an indication, and that can then have a knock-on effect of us changing our mind about what future bounties might be, because they might have a better plan than us, or they may have a better understanding than us. Any other questions? One more. Yep.
Okay, sorry, I thought of another one.
Yes?
So you said earlier in the USB bounty that updating to a newer version of the BSD source code would be in the second part.
Yes.
What's in the first part?
I can't tell you off the top of my head, because I've forgotten.
Like, what else is there to do apart from that?
So there's a number of things. There's a number of bugs in our internal bug tracking system that we need to clobber. There is splitting up, reorganizing the source code, which is currently building 3 different modules from one component in CVS. So it's quite convoluted and unmaintainable. So we want to split it apart into 3 separate components in CVS. There's isochronous support is another thing that needs to be done, but that might come from the new code base. And there's some bits that start touching on USB audio, which again is related to isochronous support. But so there's a selection of different bits of USB, and there are other bits that I have forgotten. And I can't tell you exactly how we subdivided it right now. Okay, right, well thank you all, thanks for coming.